Hi, I'm Mario Correa, and today I'm going to be talking about selecting trustees. But before we talk about trustees, let's make sure we're all on the same page. When we're talking about trustees, we're talking about trusts. And just so you know what a trust is, it's basically a living trust is when you have a contract or an agreement. It's like a will substitute, and you have the donor, or the grantor, which is you, and you give money often to yourself, but you can give it to a third person called the trustee, for the benefit of a beneficiary. I've actually seen this really nice. I always see it like I saw this represented once in a nice like drawing like this. They showed a document. That's supposed to be a document. And the one end you have the donor or the person creating it, and they create a trust, which is a piece of paper or contract where they identify a trustee, a person to do whatever these instructions of the trust are, and then they name who's going to get it. And those people getting it we call beneficiaries. So often in a family, you might do it to your spouse, will be the beneficiary, or the kids. The question is here, we're going to focus on this trustee. Who's going to be the trustee or selection of trustee? Now, the first selection of trustee is when you're appointing a trustee. First, while you're alive, you normally appoint yourself. Let's be honest. And maybe you name your spouse if your spouse is competent, but then thereafter, it becomes a little bit more complicated. And the first question you're going to have is, do you use a professional trustee versus an individual? Now here is the benefit of an individual. They know your family, and honestly, it's less expensive. And where the professional trustee, you have fees. You have a bank. A professional trustee is like a bank or an institution that does a lot of trust administrations. The nice thing about a professional trustee is that you get the You get the tax returns done correctly. You get all the information. Everything's documented correctly. And this is more appropriate where we're looking north of $2 or $3 million. Becomes a better fit. When you're looking at a smaller estate, when you're looking at just a house and a few $100,000, this normally becomes price prohibitive, and you're looking at individual trustees. And even in larger estates, you see families wanting to keep the assets in the control of the family. So there are trade-offs, and that's one of the issues you'll address. To the extent then you do an individual trustee, the second question is, how long is this trustee going to be in office? And one of the issues I see is, if the trustee's going to be in office a long time, administering a property over a long period of time, you have to realize you're giving that person a lot of power. So let's talk an example where, let's say you have a building, okay? And you want to keep that building in the family, all right? So you have the building, you put it inside of a trust, and let's say you have 3 kids. You say that they're supposed to be the beneficiaries, and let's say Bob, Steve, and John, just to throw up some names, okay? Now if you make the trustee, let's say you make the trustee Bob. Well, now all of a sudden you've given Bob a lot of control. Bob is going to be able to select hire people. He's going to select whether they sell. He's going to normally be able to select refinancing. And if he can control, and if these distributions are controlled, he can even control when money comes out. So here, when you have a lot of discretion, maybe it's not the best idea to have Bob, or if we have Bob running it, then maybe we should have some trust protector, somebody else, so that if there's a gripe or Steve or John want to change things, or they don't have to just go to court, we can create a third party called a trust protector and say, hey, if there's an issue, go to this lawyer and see if you can mediate it, see if you can resolve it. That's very different than a situation such as this, where you have the same situation, except we're not going to be managing an asset. We're going to say sell the asset, they have to sell, and just distribute outright. Now, if they're distributing outright, then it's okay to have Bob. Why? Because Bob has a very simple job. Hire a realtor, sell the property, and give everybody their share. And their share, let's say in this example, it's a third, a third, a third. They should be able to do that within a year. So in that instance, it's something that's relatively simple, and there's not a lot of discretion, so a family member or one of the beneficiaries being involved is a more attractive option. We see all this issue also with a lot of times with second marriages too. In second marriages, what you'll find is you would give, and this is very common, let me go ahead and erase some of this, is you'll set up a trust like this. You'll have husband, and wife. And I'm going to put second wife. Second. Okay, husband and second wife. In our example, husband has children. So he wants to make sure, this in the second marriage, that he has a house and maybe his second wife is living with him, that she gets to live there the rest of her life if something happens to him. He doesn't want to displace her, someone he cares about. But he also wants to make sure that his children get the inheritance after that's done and after she's taken care of. Well, what could he do? Well, he could create a trust where he says, this instruction is, while wife is alive, the wife gets to stay in the house. And upon her death, then it distributes to the children. So in this instance, who's going to be the trustee? Well, if wife is the trustee, she may be more liberal in how she interprets this trust for her benefit. If the children are trustees, maybe they'll be too restrictive. So in these instances where there is a conflict, we might consider a third party who's impartial to interpret the trust. And we've got to be very clear on those provisions, is who pays for the expenses of the trust, of the house. Who's going to pay for the house? What happens if you say the wife has to pay for the house and she doesn't or is unable to do so? Then what happens? So those are the kind of questions you have to ask, and it's best if you have a third party answering those questions, because then you have a disinterested person making those decisions. So selecting a trustee can be a very complicated process. And obviously you also want to name more than one trustee, because obviously if one of them is unable or unwilling to act, you want at least 2 to 3 backups. And we also advise for that, and who those backups will be, we help you answer those questions. So if you have a trust, or if you're interested in exploring trust and trusteeship, or amending your trust, I'd be happy to have this conversation with you, and we can think it out, because while I can tell you the consequences of what a trustee can do, you can tell me a little bit about the family and what would best fit your situation. So if you have questions, call me, Mario Correa, at 773-489-8500.